All right, let's dive into something at the very heart of your car's drivetrain. We're talking about a piece of hardware that's totally crucial for control, traction, and performance. We're talking about the differential. So, you've probably seen this a million times, right? You're at a stoplight in the winter, and the car next to you, it just can't get going. One of its wheels is just spinning like crazy on a patch of ice, but the other one, it's doing absolutely nothing. So, why does a car do that? Well, the answer is all about that component we just mentioned, the differential. Okay, so at its most basic level, a differential has one simple but super important job. It lets the left and right wheels turn at different speeds. And you might be asking, why is that so important? Well, think about it. Anytime you turn a corner, the outside wheel has to travel a longer path than the inside wheel. That means it has to spin faster. If you didn't have a differential, your car would just kind of hop and scrub its tires through every single turn. It would be a mess. So let's kick things off with the most common, the most basic type, the one that's in probably almost every car you see on the road, and that's the open differential. Now, when everything's perfect, a dry road, tons of grip, the open differential is perfectly happy. It does its job flawlessly. It lets that outer wheel speed up in a turn, which makes your handling feel smooth, predictable. For just everyday driving, it's simple and it's reliable. But, and this is a big but, it has one major critical weakness. And here's the catch. This quote from CarWow really nails it. The engine's power is always going to take the path of least resistance. It's like water flowing downhill. Now, an open diff is designed to send the same amount of torque to both wheels, but it's that path of least resistance thing that creates a huge problem the second one wheel loses grip. And that kicks off this chain reaction, right? The very second one wheel loses its grip, the open diff basically says, oh, this wheel is super easy to spin now, and it just dumps all of the engine's power right to it. So the wheel that does have traction, it gets pretty much nothing. And just like that, you're stuck, going absolutely nowhere. So how do you fix this whole one-wheel spin problem? Well, this is where we get into some much more advanced hardware. We're going to start with what you could call the smart solution, the limited slip differential, or as you'll often hear it, the LSD. And really, the name kind of gives the whole game away. An LSD does the one thing an open differential just can't do. It limits the amount of slip between the two wheels. So when it senses one wheel spinning way faster than the other, it steps in and starts sending some of that engine power over to the wheel that actually has grip. Now, there are a few different ways to make this happen, but a couple of main mechanical types really stand out. First, you've got your helical or torsion diffs. These use this really clever set of gears that kind of bind up to shuffle power across the axle. The great thing is, they're super smooth, quiet, and basically maintenance-free. Then you have clutch plate LSDs. These use a whole stack of clutches, kind of like a motorcycle clutch, that compress and lock up to transfer power. They tend to be more aggressive, really effective, but the trade-off is they can be noisy, and yeah, those clutches will eventually wear out. But this brings up a really specific weakness of that otherwise awesome torsion design. A user on Reddit put it perfectly. Because a torsion works by sensing a difference in torque, if you lift one wheel completely off the ground, so it has zero traction, zero resistance, the torsion basically gets confused. It has nothing to push against, so it just acts like a plain old open diff. And of course, in today's world, it's not all just about gears and clutches anymore. A lot of modern cars use some really sophisticated electronic systems. They use wheel speed sensors to spot a spinning wheel, and then the car's computer will apply the brake to just that one wheel. It's kind of like it's cheating. It creates this artificial resistance, which fools the open differential into sending power back to the wheel that actually has grip. And then you have even more advanced systems, usually called torque vectoring, which can use electronically controlled clutches to actively send power to the outside wheel in a corner, which can make the car feel way more agile. But what if you don't want to just limit the slip? What if you want to get rid of it completely? Well, for that, we have to move on from the smart solution and talk about let's call it the brute force solution, the locking differential. Yeah, a locker has zero time for nuance. It is all about certainty. When you engage it, as Outback Joe puts it, it just mechanically locks the two axle shafts together, period. They basically become one solid piece of metal. So once that locker is engaged, forget about the path of least resistance. It doesn't exist anymore. Both wheels are absolutely forced to turn at the exact same speed 100% of the time. I mean, it doesn't matter if one wheel's on dry pavement and the other is hanging a foot in the air, they are going to rotate together, no questions asked. And this brute force approach has some huge benefits, especially in really extreme situations. For one, the power delivery is perfectly smooth because there's no slip happening that the system needs to react to. It's also proactive, not reactive. You lock it before you get into trouble. And unlike those brake-based electronic systems, you're not wasting any energy by clamping down on the brakes to stop a wheel from spinning. But you should know, not all lockers are created equal. You have automatic lockers, sometimes people call them lunchbox lockers, and they lock and unlock all by themselves based on the torque. It can be kind of jerky and a little unpredictable, especially on pavement if it's wet or icy. Then you have selectable lockers. These are the ones the driver controls with a button or a switch. This gives you total control over when it's locked and when it's not, and that's exactly why they are the gold standard for any serious off-road vehicle. Okay, we've weeded through all the tech, so now let's put it all together. Let's see how these 3 different types of differentials actually perform when we put them head-to-head in a real-world showdown. All right, first up, let's go back to that classic scenario. You're trying to pull away from a stop, but your right side wheel is parked right on top of a nasty patch of black ice. What happens? Well, the outcome here is pretty black and white. If you have an open diff, you're going nowhere. The wheel on the ice just spins, and that's the end of your story. Now with a limited slip, the system is smart enough to detect that spin, and it sends some power over to the wheel that has grip, which will probably be enough to get you moving. And a locked diff? Honestly, it doesn't even notice the ice is there. It just sends half the power to the wheel on the pavement and drives away like absolutely nothing happened. Okay, now for a completely different kind of test. We're not fighting for traction on ice anymore. Now you're on a high-grip racetrack, and your goal is to rocket out of a tight corner as fast as humanly possible. And this scenario really shows you why there is no single best differential for every job. Here, the open diff, once again, causes a problem. It spins up the inside wheel, which gets light in a corner, and that just wastes power. The LSD, though, this is where it shines. It perfectly manages that wheel spin, letting you slam the power down for a super fast, super controlled exit from the corner. And the locker? Oh, no way. It's totally unsuitable here. Forcing both wheels to turn at the same speed would make the car fight you on the steering and just try to push straight ahead. A total disaster on a track. So after going through all of that, what's the bottom line? Let's boil this all down to the absolute essentials. What are the key things you need to remember? It really just comes down to these 3 things. First, open diffs. They're the simple, basic standard for normal, everyday cars. Second, limited slip diffs, or LSDs. They're the smart upgrade for better performance and all-weather driving. And third, locking diffs. They are the specialized brute force tool you need for the ultimate in off-road traction. You see, each one is just a different tool for a very different job. And that really leaves us with one final question to think about. When it comes to getting traction, is smarter tech always better than pure, simple brute force? It's that classic engineering trade-off, isn't it? The elegant, clever solution versus the one that's just plain unstoppable. Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.